night of rioting. Riots that have seen 2,000 vehicles torched and 900 people arrested, all sparked by the fatal shooting of a 17-year-old black youth pulled over by police in a car in Nanterre. Faced with waves of protest, President Emmanuel Macron urged parents to keep their children at home.
Un tiers des interpellés de la dernière nuit sont des jeunes, parfois des très jeunes. C'est la responsabilité des parents de les garder au domicile. Et donc il est important pour la quiétude de tous que la responsabilité parentale puisse pleinement s'exercer, et j'en appelle au sens de la responsabilité des mères et des pères de famille. La République n'a pas vocation à se substituer à eux.
Macron has lashed out against videos and calls for violence made by some young people on social networks. They think it's all a video game, he said, but it's French people who pay for it.
Vous voyez, entre 200 et 300 000 euros par bus. Enfin, je précise que nous avons déjà fait l'objet d'attaques. Il y a déjà 3 bus qui ont été brûlés dans la nuit de mercredi à jeudi, plus une rame entière de tram. Alors là, la facture est beaucoup plus élevée.
It's estimated it will cost €8 million to repair public transport vehicles and networks alone. The riots have summoned the ghost of the banlieue riots that shocked the country in 2005.
Comparisons are being drawn between what's happening now and what happened here in France almost 20 years ago, when anger spilled into the streets across the country following the deaths of 2 teenagers who were electrocuted while hiding from police during a chase in a Paris suburb. Something that residents of these suburbs say is very telling of the kind of discrimination and abuse they often feel they suffer in the hands of French authorities. Will Emmanuel Macron be able to address those grievances, something that governments before his were unable or unwilling to do? Well, the task ahead for the French president is immense.
It's about policing, and it's about France's relationship with its banlieue, its working-class suburbs. After 2 nights of rioting, the battle line's drawn over Tuesday's police shooting of Naël, the 17-year-old who tried to flee the scene in Nanterre, west of Paris. One officer faces voluntary homicide charges. The fact that he's even in custody is a rarity in this country. Barricades and tear gas, well, they steadily feed France's news cycle. But the Justice for Naël march earlier in Nanterre highlights issues that are starkly different from the Yellow Vest movement or the more recent pension reform protests. We're going to be asking about policing, minorities who feel unfairly singled out, and the rioters who target symbols of the Republic like town halls. The riots have been instead compared here to 2005, when the death of 2 youths trying to flee police sparked 3 weeks of clashes and a state of emergency. The Republic and its politicians now have time and again since promised to draw lessons, but as Emmanuel Macron's visit to Marseille this week illustrates, that remains a work in progress. How to not just keep the peace, but improve the lot of all citizens across this divide we're describing today in the France 24 debate. We're looking at the banlieue's boiling point. Joining us, Ines Siddiqui, founder of the community organizing group Get Up. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome as well to André Racoteau, researcher and on security and defense issues at Paris 8 University.
Hi.
With us here in the studio, attorney William Juliet. Welcome.
Hello.
And France 24's Mark Owen. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. How are you?
I'm okay. The
Great
France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation you have on the hashtag F24debate. Mark, let's start with images that you filmed in that western suburb of Nanterre on Wednesday.
These images, Francois, are certainly shocking to me to see this in proximity to shops, to people's homes, people just walking around. It made me feel incredibly sad, because this was meant to be a time when people would be celebrating Eid, expressing what's good about life, rejoicing in some ways, but you see that happening in the street. And of course, the woman we're seeing here is the grandmother of Naël, who we spoke to earlier when she pulled up in a car and basically gave us a proclamation about what she wanted to have: peace. She wanted to say that her grandson was a good boy, that things were being said about him that weren't true. She asked us to basically tell the story, which is what I've been trying to do since I was in Nanterre last night. And that story is one of great sadness for me, because for a young person like that to be shot in such circumstances is horrific. I think the political response has been quite positive in terms of if you're looking for some kind of social justice, if you get the president, the prime minister, the interior minister speaking out the way they have, it can only be a good thing, one would hope. But then seeing what happened in Nanterre last night, the night before, who knows, perhaps even tonight, it clearly isn't good for the people and where they live. But one can maybe understand the frustration and the anger that is there.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that political reaction, how it's starkly different from the one back in 2005. First, though, as you mentioned, there's the apprehension over what happens this Thursday evening. Earlier, there was a silent march called by the family of Naël in Nanterre. It included a minute's silence and some scuffles with police. The march concluded outside the regional state superintendent's headquarters. And there, as our reporters on the ground said, scuffles did break out. There's going to be, Ines Sediki, no tram service or bus service. As of 9 p.m., trams were targeted on Wednesday evening. Is that a good thing?
I mean, the most important thing is that the anger of the people should be heard, I think. I think also the world needs to know what's going on in France. The world needs to know that 2 police officers decided that they could shoot and execute a 17-year-old in his car because they refused to comply. I think we should sit on this information for a little while and understand that the gravity, the depth of what's going on right now, and the anger of people. I have not felt such anger in the streets within the young people that we're working with since 2005. I think it's really like there's a shift here. And the fact that it has been recorded on camera is really something that we should consider.
And before I ask you whether or not the charges pressed against the police officer will go to some way to soothing that anger, let's get more from Emerald Maxwell on what the state prosecutor and the government have been saying this Thursday.
After 48 hours of interrogation by the French police watchdog, the police officer accused of shooting a 17-year-old during a traffic stop was placed under formal investigation for intentional homicide. The local prosecutor of the Parisian suburb of Nanterre, where the shooting took place, asked for the officer to be remanded in custody.
En l'état des investigations.
Based on the information gathered so far, the public prosecutor considers that the use of the firearm was not legally justified. During his hearings, the officer explained his action as an attempt to stop the vehicle from fleeing again because of the driver's dangerous driving. It made the officer fear that someone would be knocked down and that he himself would be hit when the car restarted.
But the prosecutor's office wasn't convinced by this explanation. Key to the investigation are the few barely audible words heard just before the shot was fired in the video of the incident. Another investigation has been opened for false testimony by the police officer, who in his first statement claimed that he'd fired because the driver had tried to run him over, an account seemingly contradicted by the video and witnesses. There's been growing concern over police tactics in France, and residents of Nanterre are angry.
This police officer is a real disgrace to the police in general, and I think it's time for the authorities to take action to clean up the police force.
But the French Justice Minister defended the police.
The case is against a police officer, not the police in general. This lumping of them all in together is intolerable.
Last year, 13 people were killed after refusing to stop for police traffic checks. With a law change in 2017 that gave officers greater powers to use their weapons, now under scrutiny.
André Racoteau, what have you pieced together as to, first off, to make sense of what happened on Tuesday?
First of all, if I may, I am not talking on behalf of Paris 8 University, just to make sure.
Thanks for the clarification. Apologies for that.
No problem. Well, it's obviously, and I agree with what was said earlier, the use of a weapon was not justified. The killing doesn't fall under any police regulation as such. So there is no discussion about that. Now we need to look at what the law says when it comes to the use of weapons for the police, the law enforcement community in France. The penal code, law L122-5, and the most recent law from 2017, which does not really expand the right to use a weapon, they create a legal framework in which it is self-defense, only self-defense, meaning defending yourself or the life of other people. This is the restriction for the use of weapons for the law enforcement community. If the vehicle had been a threat for someone on the street, if there had been a threat for anyone crossing the street to be hit by the vehicle, there would have been the justification to stop its driver by any means. From what we saw in the pictures, this is not what happened. So, being charged with intentional killing is the highest charge that can be brought against this policeman. So basically, at this point, I think the right thing has been done. And I understand the anger of the people. It makes sense, of course. Losing a 17-year-old is something it's tragic. But I think the way the procedure is going in the right direction. So I think we are facing a policeman who acted badly, who is not representative of the whole police force. And we need also to look at the context. In the last 10 years, we've had twice more refusals to comply in the streets than we used to have. So, things are getting difficult to handle for the police forces too, and they would require better training because of harsher situations in the streets. And what we saw on those images and the tragedy that we witnessed, it's for me, it's bad training and something that should not happen.
The need for better training, is that something that police unions agree with?
They ask for more training when you talk about, for instance, the use of weapons. There's not enough rounds shot during the year for training. All these things are not, we know we need more, but it costs money. So a better police means to spend more money on training as well. And, money is money, so.
William Juliet, you agree?
I tend to agree with what was just said. The legal framework that was put in place in 2017 did change things a bit.
Let's talk about that. There was these two police officers who were nearly burned alive in their patrol car in the southern suburbs of Paris, and they changed the law.
Absolutely. The idea of changing the law in 2017 was to enable policemen to open fire, but this is what it's about, in the situation of a car that would not stop if it was asked to stop, and of a driver whom the police officers would think can be a threat when driving away to other people. And this is an extension of the self-defense usual framework and of the framework that was in place before, in the sense that it is possible to open fire in the case, for example, where in front of the car you have kids, someone stops, then clearly is going to drive away very quickly. And if you consider that there's an immediate danger for people, then you can, if it is proportionate, if you have no other way, if you consider that the